years.
7 years.
Of no commitment.
No commitment.
Just being friends.
Just being friends and having sex.
And having sex. You state that you have had a romantic relationship with Mr. Birch since 2009. Prove that Mr. Birch is the biological father of your 23-month-old son, Yunai. And his paternity denial makes you furious.
Yes, Your Honor.
You never had a relationship and were only friends with benefit. A 7-year relationship and he's denying your baby? Why?
He doesn't want the responsibility of another child, nor does Mr. Birch want to pay child support.
Your Honor, we only had a friends with benefits since we first started. And I made it clear to her.
But it is said and done now. I'm here today to let him know that this is his child, and I would appreciate if he step up and take care of him.
Unprotected sex.
Unprotected sex.
No, Your Honor, that's not true. At the times we would have sex, she was actually bringing the condoms to me.
So you...
This courtroom story unfolds as a complex DNA test dispute where emotions, memories, and evidence collide under the authority of Judge Lauren Lake. The case begins with a mother who has come to court seeking certainty, responsibility, and recognition for her child. She believes the man standing across from her is the biological father, while he firmly denies paternity and insists that their connection was never more than a casual arrangement. What starts as a disagreement quickly becomes a deep examination of truth, accountability, and the fragile line between personal relationships and legal responsibility. At the evidence stage in divorce case, style proceedings, Judge Lauren Lake carefully listens to both sides. The mother explains that the relationship spanned several years and evolved emotionally, even if it was never formally defined. She describes moments where she believed commitment was forming, trust was being built, and exclusivity existed, even when no promises were clearly spoken. Her position reflects many real-life DNA test cheating stories, where emotional attachment grows despite unclear boundaries. She insists that the child deserves acknowledgement, support, and a father who will step forward. The alleged father presents a very different version of events. He repeatedly emphasizes that the relationship was based on mutual understanding with no expectations. According to him, there was no commitment, no exclusivity, and no intention of building a family. He argues that the timing of intimacy does not align with the window of conception and introduces doubt by pointing to other possible partners. His testimony highlights how people regret taking truth lightly, only realizing later that casual decisions can lead to life-altering consequences. Judge Lauren Lake brings the focus back to facts, explaining the relationship between law and justice. Emotions, assumptions, and personal beliefs may shape how people feel, but the court relies on evidence, timelines, and legal standards. She discusses how adverse inference in Evidence Act principles can influence a case when information is withheld, memories are inconsistent, or testimony contradicts documented facts. Every statement made in court becomes part of a larger puzzle that the DNA test is meant to resolve. Witnesses are introduced to provide context rather than drama. Friends and family members describe what they observed over the years: frequent contact, emotional dependence, shared routines, and moments that resembled a committed relationship. These testimonies resemble celebrate recovery testimonies, where people openly reflect on past choices, emotional vulnerability, and patterns that led them into complicated situations. Each witness adds weight to the narrative, but none can provide the certainty the court requires. As the hearing progresses, Judge Lauren Lake addresses the concept of justice in jurisprudence, explaining that fairness does not always mean the outcome someone hopes for. Justice means uncovering the truth, even when that truth disrupts relationships, challenges personal identity, or forces people to accept painful realities. The court is not here to punish emotions or judge character, but to determine legal responsibility based on scientific proof. The DNA test becomes the central turning point of the case. It represents more than biology. It symbolizes clarity in a situation clouded by assumptions and emotional attachment. Judge Lauren Lake explains how DNA evidence functions in family court, why it is considered definitive, and how it protects the rights of the child above all else. She emphasizes that once results are read, denial has no legal standing, and responsibility must be addressed accordingly. While waiting for the results, the courtroom atmosphere reflects themes often discussed in the Truth Changes Everything podcast and the Game Changing Attorney podcast. A single verified fact can overturn years of belief. People come into court confident in their version of events, only to realize that truth operates independently of emotion. This moment of anticipation exposes vulnerability on both sides, reminding everyone present that truth does not take sides. Parallel discussions in the courtroom touch on broader family law issues, including Supreme Court child support principles that guide lower courts in ensuring a child's financial and emotional well-being. Judge Lauren Lake clarifies that paternity is not only about biology but also about long-term responsibility. Once paternity is established or denied, legal pathways open or close, affecting child support obligations, parental rights, and future stability. The case also briefly echoes themes found in Adoption Stories' full episodes, where identity, belonging, and biological connection are deeply intertwined. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges that regardless of the outcome, the child's need for love, structure, and honesty remains unchanged. Adults may struggle with disappointment or relief, but the child must not bear the emotional cost of unresolved adult conflicts. When the DNA results are finally presented, they bring an irreversible conclusion. The scientific finding confirms whether the alleged father is biologically connected to the child or not. In that moment, everything spoken earlier is reframed. Promises, accusations, and memories either gain validation or lose relevance. This is the point where people regret taking truth lightly, realizing that assumptions cannot replace evidence. Judge Lauren Lake delivers the results with clarity and compassion. She addresses both parties directly, explaining what the outcome means legally and emotionally. If paternity is excluded, she encourages emotional closure and honesty moving forward. If paternity is confirmed, she outlines the next legal steps regarding responsibility, child support, and the child's future. Her words reinforce the delicate balance between accountability and humanity. The courtroom story concludes this phase not with celebration or defeat, but with reality. The DNA test has spoken, and the law responds accordingly. What remains is the personal journey each individual must take after leaving the courtroom. This case serves as a powerful example of how the justice system navigates deeply personal disputes using structure, evidence, and fairness, reminding everyone that in matters of family and identity, truth ultimately defines the path forward. As the courtroom moves beyond the initial shock of testimony, Judge Lauren Lake shifts the focus toward accountability and consequence. The case no longer revolves solely around who said what in the past, but around how present facts must guide future decisions. This phase of the hearing reflects how Truth Changes Everything podcast style moments occur in real courtrooms, where once uncertainty is removed, responsibility becomes unavoidable. Judge Lauren Lake revisits the timeline carefully, breaking down dates, patterns of contact, and the claimed window of conception. She explains to everyone present that in family court, consistency matters. Inconsistent stories, emotional reactions, and selective memory can weaken credibility, especially when weighed against medical timelines and documented evidence. This approach reflects the relationship between law and justice, where fairness is achieved not by sympathy alone, but by structure and proof. The mother explains her emotional state during the period in question, describing confusion, attachment, and hope. She acknowledges that the relationship was never formally defined, but insists that actions created expectations. Her testimony mirrors many DNA test cheating stories, where unclear boundaries lead to devastating misunderstandings. Judge Lauren Lake listens without judgment, reminding the courtroom that emotional vulnerability does not equate to dishonesty, but it also cannot override scientific evidence. The alleged father responds by reiterating that he never intended to mislead. He states that he was honest about his intentions and that any emotional interpretation went beyond what was agreed upon. Judge Lauren Lake challenges him gently but firmly, questioning whether honesty also includes understanding how actions affect others. This exchange highlights a recurring theme in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal truth and moral responsibility intersect, but do not always align perfectly. At this point, the court addresses why DNA testing is so critical in modern family law. Judge Lauren Lake explains that unlike circumstantial evidence, DNA results provide clarity that protects all parties involved, especially the child. She emphasizes that many people regret taking truth lightly, assuming outcomes based on feelings or appearances, only to confront irreversible facts later. The DNA test is not a punishment. It is a safeguard against prolonged conflict. The courtroom atmosphere becomes reflective rather than confrontational. Judge Lauren Lake discusses how unresolved paternity disputes can affect a child's emotional development, financial stability, and sense of identity. She references principles similar to those found in Supreme Court child support standards, where the best interest of the child remains central regardless of adult conflict. This reminder reframes the case away from personal grievances and toward long-term impact. Attention briefly turns to how this case fits within broader legal patterns. Judge Lauren Lake explains adverse inference in Evidence Act concepts, clarifying that courts must sometimes draw conclusions based on what is presented and what is missing. She notes that when individuals fail to provide consistent or complete information, the court must rely more heavily on objective proof. This explanation educates everyone present about why courts prioritize evidence over narrative. The discussion also touches on healing beyond the courtroom. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges that outcomes like this often push people toward self-reflection, similar to stories shared in Celebrate Recovery testimonies. Whether the DNA confirms or excludes paternity, emotional recovery remains necessary. The court can resolve legal questions, but it cannot heal emotional wounds. That responsibility lies with the individuals involved. As the hearing continues, Judge Lauren Lake reinforces that this courtroom is not a place for revenge or validation, but for resolution. She reminds both parties that continuing to fight after truth is revealed only harms the child. Her guidance echoes lessons from the Divorce Course podcast, where legal clarity is often the first step toward emotional closure and healthier co-parenting, or healthy separation. The DNA results, already entered into the record, now define the legal reality of the case. Judge Lauren Lake explains what those results mean moving forward. If the alleged father is excluded, the mother must redirect her efforts toward identifying the correct biological parent or making independent decisions for her child. If paternity is confirmed, the father must prepare to fulfill legal obligations, including financial support and potential involvement in the child's life. This moment underscores how people regret taking truth lightly, especially when casual relationships produce permanent outcomes. Judge Lauren Lake uses the case as a broader lesson, addressing the audience indirectly about responsibility, protection, and foresight. She emphasizes that family court is filled with cases that begin with, "It was just casual," but end with lifelong consequences. The case also reflects themes commonly seen in adoption stories' full episodes, where identity questions emerge long before legal answers are provided. Judge Lauren Lake reminds the courtroom that every child deserves honesty about their origins, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. Avoiding the truth does not protect children, clarity does. As the session nears its conclusion, Judge Lauren Lake summarizes the journey of the case. She acknowledges the courage it takes to come to court, submit to DNA testing, and face public results. She also points out that denial delays healing, while acceptance, regardless of outcome, creates a path forward. This balance between firmness and empathy defines her judicial approach. The courtroom leaves this stage with fewer questions but heavier understanding. The DNA test has resolved the legal dispute, but emotional processing will continue beyond the court's walls. Judge Lauren Lake encourages both parties to move forward responsibly, reminding them that the child will one day look back on how adults handled this moment. This part of the story reinforces the core message of the case. Truth is not always what people hope for, but it is always what justice requires. Through evidence, structure, and compassion, the court fulfills its role, not to choose sides but to reveal reality. As the case reaches its final stage, Judge Lauren Lake brings the courtroom to a moment of reflection. The legal question has already been answered by science, but the emotional consequences are still unfolding. This is where many people truly understand why a DNA test is not just a formality but a turning point that reshapes lives. In this courtroom, the truth no longer belongs to opinion or memory. It belongs to evidence. Judge Lauren Lake addresses both parties with clarity, reinforcing that the court's role is not to validate feelings but to establish facts. She explains that once the DNA test results are entered, the law moves forward without hesitation. This is the moment where people regret taking truth lightly, realizing that denial, hope, or fear cannot override scientific certainty. The courtroom becomes quiet, not from shock, but from acceptance. She revisits the broader implications of the ruling, especially regarding the child. Drawing from principles aligned with Supreme Court child support standards, Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that every child has the right to stability, honesty, and legal clarity. Whether paternity is confirmed or denied, the outcome defines the next chapter of the child's life. The court's responsibility is to ensure that chapter is grounded in reality, not assumption. The discussion then turns toward accountability. Judge Lauren Lake explains that if paternity is excluded, it is not a declaration of failure, but a conclusion that allows everyone to stop living in uncertainty. If paternity is confirmed, it becomes the beginning of responsibility rather than the end of freedom. This moment reflects the relationship between law and justice, where fairness is achieved by clarity, even when that clarity is painful. Judge Lauren Lake speaks directly about how often family court cases resemble stories heard on the Truth Changes Everything podcast. People enter convinced of their version of events, only to discover that truth operates independently of emotion. She explains that the justice system is designed not to protect comfort, but to protect truth and the well-being of children who cannot speak for themselves. The court also acknowledges the emotional damage caused by prolonged denial. Judge Lauren Lake notes that dragging out uncertainty harms everyone involved, especially the child. This is where the concept of justice in jurisprudence becomes real and practical. Justice is not about winning or losing. It is about resolution that prevents further harm. The DNA test, though simple in procedure, serves as the most powerful tool for that resolution. As the final words are delivered, Judge Lauren Lake encourages both parties to reflect on their choices. She explains that many cases like this begin with casual decisions and unclear boundaries, leading to outcomes no one anticipated. These moments mirror themes found in DNA test cheating stories, where trust, responsibility, and truth collide in unexpected ways. The lesson is not judgment, but awareness. She also touches briefly on healing beyond the courtroom. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges that some individuals leave court carrying disappointment, while others leave with obligation. Either way, emotional recovery is necessary. She references ideas similar to celebrate recovery testimonies, where acceptance of truth becomes the first step toward personal growth and healthier future decisions. The courtroom is reminded that legal closure does not erase emotional attachment. Judge Lauren Lake makes it clear that even when paternity is denied, emotional bonds may still exist, and those bonds must be processed honestly. The court cannot dictate emotions, but it can define legal reality so that healing can begin without confusion. Attention then shifts to future responsibility. Judge Lauren Lake outlines what happens next, depending on the result. If paternity is confirmed, the legal path includes child support, potential visitation, and long-term responsibility. If paternity is denied, the court urges the mother to focus on creating stability for the child without lingering conflict. These steps reflect lessons often discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where legal clarity becomes the foundation for emotional closure. The case also reinforces the importance of evidence. Judge Lauren Lake reminds the courtroom that adverse inference in Evidence Act principles exist to protect fairness. When facts are unclear or disputed, objective proof becomes essential. DNA testing removes speculation, preventing future disputes and ensuring that decisions are based on truth rather than narrative. As the hearing officially concludes, Judge Lauren Lake offers final guidance. She urges both parties to remember that one day, the child will ask questions. The answers given should be honest, respectful, and free from bitterness. This echoes themes seen in adoption stories' full episodes, where identity and truth shape a child's understanding of themselves far more than secrecy ever could. The courtroom story ends not with celebration, but with clarity. The DNA test has fulfilled its purpose, and the law has spoken. What remains is personal responsibility. Judge Lauren Lake reminds everyone that while the court can determine facts, it cannot force maturity or compassion. Those qualities must come from within. This case stands as a powerful example of why family court exists. It is not merely a place for conflict, but a space where uncertainty is replaced with truth. Through structure, evidence, and fairness, the justice system fulfills its role. The outcome may not satisfy every emotion, but it satisfies the law. In the end, this courtroom journey illustrates a simple reality. Truth may be uncomfortable, but it is necessary. DNA tests remove doubt, courts provide resolution, and responsibility follows clarity. Under the guidance of Judge Lauren Lake, this case demonstrates how justice works, not by emotion, but by evidence, fairness, and the unwavering priority of a child's future.